In 2012, the CIA gave an award to Mexico's top law enforcement official. It was for friendship, collaboration, and support in the war on drugs. 7 years later, the FBI arrested that same man in Dallas, Texas. The charges: conspiracy to traffic cocaine, taking tens of millions in bribes, and running a continuing criminal enterprise. How does someone go from receiving a CIA commendation to facing life in prison? The answer reveals one of the most catastrophic intelligence failures in the history of US-Mexico drug enforcement. And it starts with a simple question. What if the man in charge of fighting the cartels was working for them all along? His name was Genaro Garcia Luna. And for 6 years, between 2006 and 2012, he held one of the most powerful security positions in the Western Hemisphere. As Mexico's Secretary of Public Security, he controlled the federal police. Every raid, every arrest, every extradition, every piece of intelligence flowing between Mexican and American agencies passed through his office. He was the architect of President Felipe Calderón's militarized drug war, a campaign that would leave over 60,000 people dead. He met regularly with the DEA, the FBI, and the CIA. He received commendations. He was granted an Einstein visa to live in the United States, a classification reserved for individuals of extraordinary ability who serve the national interest. But behind the press conferences and the diplomatic meetings, Garcia Luna was running a parallel operation, one that involved briefcases filled with cash, safe houses in Mexico City, coded radio messages sent minutes before federal police raids, and a partnership with the Sinaloa Cartel, the most powerful drug trafficking organization in the world. This is the story of how a drug czar became the cartel's inside man, and how, for over a decade, no one in power wanted to see it. Genaro Garcia Luna didn't come from poverty. He wasn't a street cop turned dirty by desperation. He was educated, ambitious, a career intelligence officer who understood how systems worked, and more importantly, how they could be exploited. In the 1990s, he rose through Mexico's intelligence apparatus during a period of institutional chaos. The old system, the PRI party's 7-decade monopoly on power, was collapsing. New agencies were being created, old hierarchies were dissolving, and in that vacuum, men like Garcia Luna thrived. By 2001, he had become the head of the Federal Investigation Agency, Mexico's equivalent of the FBI. By 2006, when Felipe Calderón won a contested presidential election by less than 1%, Garcia Luna was chosen for an even more important role: Secretary of Public Security. It was a position that didn't just control law enforcement, it controlled information, intelligence, the flow of data between agencies. In a country where corruption was systemic, Garcia Luna now sat at the choke point. The psychology of his corruption likely wasn't complex. Intelligence analysts who've studied the case suggest it wasn't ideology or cartel coercion, it was opportunity combined with rationalization. The Mexican security apparatus had always been corrupt. Every level: local police, state police, military commanders. Why should he be different? And more importantly, why should he be poor while others got rich? The cartel wasn't asking him to join a criminal conspiracy. They were asking him to do what everyone else was already doing, just at a higher level, for higher stakes. The first bribe probably came early, perhaps before he even became secretary. One can assume it started small: information, a warning, a name removed from a list. And then, when nothing happened, no arrest, no investigation, no consequences, it escalated. To understand why Garcia Luna was so valuable, you need to understand the strategic shift happening inside Mexico's cartels in the mid-2000s. For decades, drug trafficking organizations had operated through violence and territorial control. They fought the government. They fought each other. They built armies. But the Sinaloa cartel, led by Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán and Ismael El Mayo Zambada, understood something their rivals didn't. You don't fight a government that can be bought. You invest in it. The Sinaloa cartel didn't need to win a war against the Mexican state. They needed to ensure the state fought their enemies for them. And for that, they needed someone on the inside. Not a local cop, not a customs official. They needed someone at the top, someone who could shape operations, redirect investigations, protect shipments, eliminate rivals under the guise of law enforcement. Genaro Garcia Luna was that person. In December 2006, newly inaugurated President Felipe Calderón launched his war on drugs. It wasn't a metaphor. He deployed 6,500 troops to Michoacán in the first weeks of his presidency. Federal police units were mobilized across the country. Arrest rates skyrocketed, extraditions to the United States increased. Calderon's message was clear. Mexico was taking the cartels seriously. The violence that followed was catastrophic. By the end of his 6-year term, over 60,000 people would be dead. Entire cities became war zones. Mass graves were discovered. Journalists were murdered. Mayors were assassinated. But beneath the chaos, a pattern was emerging. The Sinaloa cartel wasn't just surviving the drug war. They were thriving. While rival organizations, the Beltran-Leyva cartel, the Zetas, the Juarez cartel, were being dismantled by federal operations, the Sinaloa cartel expanded. Their leaders stayed free. Their shipments moved uninterrupted. Their rivals kept getting arrested. It wasn't luck. It was Garcia Luna. The mechanics of the operation were straightforward but required precision. According to testimony later provided by cartel operatives who became cooperating witnesses, the payment system functioned like a corporate retainer. The Sinaloa cartel paid Garcia Luna millions of dollars, not once, not sporadically, regularly, systematically. The money was delivered in cash, U.S. $100 bills, bundled in stacks of $10,000, packed into briefcases, duffel bags. Sometimes the exchanges happened in safe houses, sometimes at restaurants. One cartel courier testified that he personally delivered money to Garcia Luna at a French restaurant across the street from the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City. The payments weren't gifts. They were compensation for specific services, and Garcia Luna delivered. First, he provided intelligence. The Sinaloa cartel received detailed reports on rival organizations, where they operated, who their leaders were, what the federal police knew about them. This intelligence wasn't just valuable for avoiding arrest, it was valuable for targeting enemies. The cartel could plan ambushes, eliminate rivals, take over territory, all while the government's own intelligence apparatus fed them the information they needed. Second, he provided protection. When the federal police planned raids on Sinaloa cartel operations, Garcia Luna ensured advance warning was sent. Testimony at trial revealed the use of coded messages transmitted over police radios. One example, by 45, everyone on 35. Translated, it meant that by 4:45, everyone needed to be off Route 35 because a raid was coming. Standard counter-surveillance procedure would involve encrypted communications, but the cartel operatives testified these warnings came directly from federal channels only Garcia Luna's office controlled. Third, he provided credentials, federal police badges, uniforms, vehicles with government plates. These weren't fake, they were real, issued through official channels. Cartel operatives could move cocaine shipments through military checkpoints by simply flashing federal police identification. They weren't impersonating law enforcement, they were law enforcement. And fourth, he eliminated rivals. Not through cartel violence, through state violence. When the Sinaloa cartel wanted a competitor destroyed, Garcia Luna's federal police did it for them. Arrests were made, leaders were extradited, operations were dismantled. The Beltran-Leyva cartel, once allies of Sinaloa who turned into bitter enemies, were systematically targeted by federal operations throughout Calderon's presidency. Arturo Beltran-Leyva was killed in a military raid in 2009. His brothers were arrested or killed shortly after. The organization fractured. Meanwhile, El Chapo and El Mayo remained untouched. The scale of this corruption wasn't just individual malfeasance, it was institutional capture. Garcia Luna didn't operate alone. He built a cell of loyal subordinates within the federal police, officers who understood the arrangement, who facilitated payments, who delivered intelligence, who coordinated operations. This wasn't a rogue official taking bribes. This was a shadow structure, operating inside the government. And throughout all of this, Genaro Garcia Luna was working closely with the United States. The DEA had agents embedded in Mexico. The FBI ran joint operations. The CIA provided intelligence support. Garcia Luna met with them regularly. He attended conferences. He shared information, or at least the information he wanted them to see. U.S. officials praised him publicly. They called him a partner, a reformer, someone finally willing to take on the cartels. In 2012, the CIA gave him an award. The citation praised his friendship, collaboration, and support in the fight against organized crime. That same year, Garcia Luna left office when Calderon's term ended. He moved to Miami. He started a security consulting firm. He bought a house in an upscale neighborhood. He sent his children to private schools. He lived openly, comfortably, without apparent concern. But the evidence was already building. The DEA had heard rumors for years, intercepted communications, informant reports, whispers from cartel operatives in custody. But rumors weren't proof. And confronting the Mexican government's top security official with unverified allegations could destroy diplomatic relations, so the evidence sat in files, unacted upon. The intelligence failure wasn't a lack of information, it was a lack of will. Then, in January 2019, everything changed. El Chapo's trial in Brooklyn became a public spectacle. Cooperating witnesses, former cartel members who'd flipped, testified in excruciating detail about the Sinaloa cartel's operations. And multiple witnesses named Genaro Garcia Luna. They described the payments, the briefcases, the protection. One witness, a cartel logistics coordinator, testified that Garcia Luna personally received millions of dollars. Another said the cartel referred to him as the one who could make problems disappear. The testimony was devastating, and it was under oath. In a U.S. federal courtroom, the Southern District of New York, one of the most aggressive and credible prosecutorial offices in the country, now had evidence, not rumors, evidence. On December 9, 2019, FBI agents arrested Genaro Garcia Luna at his home in Dallas, Texas. He'd been living in the United States for 7 years. The indictment was comprehensive: conspiracy to traffic cocaine, conspiracy to distribute cocaine, making false statements, engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise. The U.S. government alleged he'd received tens of millions of dollars in bribes, that he'd facilitated the trafficking of thousands of kilograms of cocaine, that he'd betrayed his office, his country, and every law enforcement officer who believed in the mission. Garcia Luna denied everything. He claimed he was being framed, that the witnesses were liars seeking reduced sentences, that the charges were politically motivated. His defense team argued the entire case rested on the testimony of criminals, men who'd murdered, trafficked, drugs, and had every reason to lie. But the prosecution had more than testimony. They had financial records, bank transfers, real estate purchases that couldn't be explained by a government salary. They had intercepted communications. They had patterns of behavior, federal operations that inexplicably failed, raids that arrived minutes too late, intelligence that disappeared before it could be acted upon. The trial began in January 2023. It lasted 5 weeks. Over a dozen witnesses testified. The jury heard recordings, saw photographs, reviewed financial documents, and on February 21, 2023, they returned a verdict: guilty on all counts. Genaro Garcia Luna didn't react visibly. He turned briefly to look at his wife and children in the gallery. He placed his hand over his heart. Then he faced forward. In October 2024, he was sentenced to more than 38 years in federal prison. The judge called his crimes a betrayal of public trust on a scale rarely seen. The prosecutor described him as one of the most corrupt officials in the history of modern Mexico. But the conviction of Garcia Luna doesn't answer the deeper question. How did he operate for so long without being stopped? How did U.S. intelligence agencies with billions of dollars in resources, with signals intelligence, with human sources inside the cartels, miss what was happening? Part of the answer is structural. The U.S. needed Mexico's cooperation. The drug war depended on it: extraditions, joint operations, intelligence sharing. Accusing Mexico's top security official of working for the cartels could collapse that relationship. So warnings were ignored, red flags were rationalized. The institutional incentive was to look the other way. Part of the answer is psychological: confirmation bias. U.S. officials wanted to believe the partnership was working. They wanted to believe that someone in the Mexican government was finally serious about fighting the cartels. Garcia Luna told them what they wanted to hear. He delivered arrests. He provided intelligence, curated intelligence, but intelligence nonetheless. He looked the part, sounded the part, and so they believed him. And part of the answer is endemic. Garcia Luna wasn't an anomaly. He was part of a pattern. In 1997, Mexico's first drug czar, General Jesus Gutierrez Rebolo, was arrested after just 2 months in office. He'd been living in a luxury apartment owned by Amado Carrillo Fuentes, leader of the Juarez cartel. The general was sentenced to 40 years in prison. The scandal was supposed to be a wake-up call. Instead, it was a preview. The cost of Garcia Luna's corruption can't be fully measured. 60,000 deaths during Calderon's presidency. Some were cartel members, some were police, some were soldiers, some were journalists, activists, and civilians caught in crossfire. How many of those deaths happened because Garcia Luna redirected federal operations? How many informants were exposed because he passed their names to the cartel? How many rival traffickers were killed in raids orchestrated not by law enforcement, but by the Sinaloa cartel using the state as a weapon? Every sabotaged investigation, every compromised operation, every warning sent minutes before a raid, each one represents a betrayal, not just of a government, but of the people who believed the fight was real. Today, Genaro Garcia Luna sits in a U.S. federal prison. The Sinaloa cartel continues to operate. El Mayo Zambada was arrested in 2024, but the organization remains one of the most powerful trafficking networks in the world. Felipe Calderón, the president who appointed Garcia Luna, has defended his decision, insisting he had no knowledge of the corruption. The CIA has never publicly explained the 2012 award. The DEA has never released a full accounting of what intelligence they had and when. And the question remains, if the man in charge of fighting the cartels was working for them, what does that say about the war itself? Can a system built on corruption ever reform itself? Or is the war on drugs simply a mechanism by which power is redistributed, with the casualties always borne by those who have no seat at the table? Share your thoughts below.